All right, good afternoon, listeners. You're listening to the Lament of Hope blog and podcast. I'm here today with Joel Salatin, actually, from Polyface Farm, which is in Swoke, Virginia. Um, I'm blessed to be able to talk with him because one thing that actually led me to this topic is I've been thinking a lot about the difference between kind of consumptive farming that is really large scale, large quantities, and a lot of times maybe less healthy or less humane ways of farming, as opposed to um, maybe more animal friendly or less cruelty to animals while farming. I was thinking about this because I actually visited a chicken farm recently and saw just the mass production that goes on there, and I was really surprised by it. I actually never seen anything or heard anything like that before. So I wanted to talk to Joel because he's one of the few farms that actually does a more humane, more natural way of farming, and he advocates for that on a regular basis. So, Joel, I wanted to ask you, before we get started, a lot of the listeners probably don't really understand why this would be important. I have to admit, I don't really think I mean, until I saw the chicken farm that I visited, it really didn't matter much to me either. I didn't think much about it. So I wanted to ask you, why do you think this topic is important?
Well, because what a great lead in. So it's important because the production model, the production model creates the numerous nuances of what you actually do in production. So, for example, if you're going to bring animals inside, now you have a different set of issues, from hygiene, sanitation, respiratory, fresh air, sunlight, all those kinds of things happen. All right. So that decision to bring them indoors is like an initial domino.
Mm,
And of course, then when you bring them indoors, you're going to put them together, and you're going to have this huge capital investment that has to be paid for. So you have to now make sure that you can't rest it. You have to keep pushing animals through there all the time, because you have to pay for the capital infrastructure. And that then means that there can be no rest period. Well, when there's no rest period, then you don't have what I call cul-de-sacs for pathogens and toxins and things like that. And so they gradually build. Well, then somehow we've got to deal with those because they become more virulent. So if we
mm,
use antimicrobials, if we use antibiotics, if we use mRNA, that's now being used a lot, if we use all of these things, then the survivors become more and more robust, because there are always survivors. You don't kill everything. And so those then become superbugs. Then you have MRSA, C. diff, and resistant strains of superbugs. You see what I'm
yeah.
you have this catalyzing thing. Not to mention the fact you have all this manure in one spot, that instead of being spread out across the landscape in a blessing, nice and thin and absorptive and metabolizable, instead now it becomes a heap, or a lagoon, or some sort of manure pit of toxic substance,
Hmm.
that often overrides the ecological umbilical on which this massive centralized industrial animal facility sits. And so there's a cascading number of things that happen. And finally, I would just say, I wouldn't be honest to myself, I think, or yourself, if I didn't say that as you move down this cascade of things, it gradually takes the reverence, it
Hmm.
takes the being reverence and respect, what I call the pigness of the pig, the chickenness of the chicken. It gradually moves that away to where these are just inanimate protoplasmic moving substances that are basically mechanistic. They're mechanical rather than biological. And so the caretaker, whether it's the farm owner or the company that owns whatever it is,
Hmm.
the caretaker then becomes less and less inclined to appreciate what it takes to make a happy pig, a happy chicken, a happy cow, And that cascades into just a very callous, um, a callous disregard, if you will, for the entire whatever the beings, the beings affirmation as a being, as a specific being, and that then translates to everything. I will tell you this, that over the years we've serviced hundreds of restaurants. We've
Hmm.
learned a lot from our chefs, chefs, and one of the things that we've learned is that all of our stuff, and this is not a sales pitch. I'm just explaining that all of our meat and poultry cooks about 20% faster than what's in the supermarket, about
Hmm.
20% faster. And we have tried to figure out what all that is. We've asked people that are smarter than us and all that. And the only thing that keeps coming up is that our animals, because they're not emotionally stressed, they are not spending their life secreting adrenaline. And adrenaline, it tightens up your muscles. That's how you run a sprint, or that's why somebody, when a car falls on somebody can come up and pick up 1,000-pound car, off of it's adrenaline.
Yeah.
It tightens up everything. And so our animals, because they are stress free, don't secrete that adrenaline drip all their life, and therefore, when it comes to cooking, they're much more relaxed, and it makes so you thought about what you've been thinking about lately. So this is spring, and I'm getting ready to write my what we call our spring epistle. I have a once a year annual kind of newsletter that I've done for 40 years, and we call it the spring epistle now. It's gone from the newsletter to now Joel's epistle. You can imagine. And the thing the phrase, it's a brand new phrase, so you're the first person who's heard this, Danielle. So you're getting the latest of my thinking, and my thinking is, can I eat happiness? Can I ingest happiness? And we say you are what you eat,
Hmm.
and so if what I'm eating is happy, does that have any effect on me? I'm not just speaking nutritionally. I'm speaking, fatty acids, phytochemicals, all sorts of things, nuances
Yeah.
that occur from happiness. Because the fact is, Danielle, almost all of the animals and eggs, animal proteins consumed in America, um, are from animals that are not happy, that have been um, disrespected and dishonored to their unique physiological capabilities. And when that happens, we are now we are when we eat that, we are now ingesting the pain and the stress.
Hmm.
um, I'm not ready to go clear over into the animal rights cultist movement, okay? But I am suggesting that we then ingest that level of disrespect and violence to the pig, the chicken, the cow, whatever it is, and 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 that that colors the you know the content, the nutritional, the energy, if you will, the energy of what we're ingesting. So
Yeah.
I'm working on trying to articulate that, but I think you see where I'm wrestling, and I'm trying to pose the question: can we ingest happiness? Can we physically ingest happiness? And I would like to
Yeah.
think that I would like to think that yes, we can.
What would you say though to people who might say, you might be blowing this out of proportion? Uh, is it really that bad? I mean, we go to the store, we get the food. It's also the most convenient way to get our meat, especially. I mean, is it really that big a deal? Um, are you not exaggerating, perhaps, how bad this is? Can you maybe explain what, um, what a day is like for processing food that eventually gets to the grocery store to maybe enhance the point you're making?
Yeah. So. I want you to think about, let's take a chicken. A chicken is a bird. And if
Mhm.
you think about birds in their whatever natural environment, they're they're out in the air, they're flying around, they scratch in the dirt, they eat some bugs here, they eat a worm over there, and okay, just think about the life of a bird. Okay, so here we got a chicken. We're going to put it in a confinement house. It can't fly, it can't get outside, it can't even get any sunshine. Um, and I want you to think about the air. So here's I'm talking about like a broiler house, a meat chicken house. There's 20,000 chickens
Yeah.
on a floor. They they're not potty trained. They don't have flush toilets, so they poop where they live.
Yeah.
They walk in it, and all those birds now are walking and stirring up. So I'm going to try to paint a word picture. They're stirring up this fecal, this fecal, dried fecal material that's on the ground. And of course, their nostrils are only whatever, 12, 13, 14 inches, off this floor.
Yeah.
And this dust is completely filled with fecal particulate, which acts as sandpaper. When they then take a breath, that fecal particulate comes in to their mucous
Hmm.
membranes,
Hmm.
and it actually abrades like sandpaper because it's coarse. It's got pieces in it, and it actually abrades those very tender mucus respiratory membranes and create abrasions. That's another pretty word for saying open sores. Okay, so
Yeah.
bloody sores. All right. So imagine these tender respiratory membranes through the lungs, through the trachea, and through the nostrils, and now they have these lesions, these lesions of bloody hemorrhaging abrasions going down, and
Hmm.
that allows the fecal particulate to actually go straight into the bloodstream. You're very young. I don't know whether you remember several years ago when we had this, I think it was a salmonella outbreak in an egg farm out in Wisconsin,
Yeah.
and several people died, and it was in the eggs, and people were asking, well, how does it get in the eggs? The eggs aren't, they're not exposed to the air. They're internal. They're in the body. They're not. How does this stuff get in there? Well,
Hmm.
Danielle, this is the way stuff gets in there, is because these sores, these respiratory lesions create a what it eliminates the body's natural biological barriers
Yeah.
from this outside fecal particulate getting right into the bloodstream. Well, once
Hmm.
it's directly into the bloodstream, then it can go into the oviduct. The oviduct goes straight into the egg, and now you've got actual salmonella in the egg. And,
Hmm.
and so that is the reality of how these things develop.
Well, I know when I saw the chicken farm that I was on too, you had like free stories and then you had 18,000 chickens on each story. And then you'd also have just a bunch of feed that was continually being pumped in, so the chickens were just eating the whole time. And then
Hmm.
about 9 weeks after, they would kill them because they'd be fat by then.
Hmm.
Um, and that was very surprising to me because I thought, they're just eating the whole time, like they're not doing anything else. Um, how is it different, for instance, your farm? The big thing I think that a lot of, well, for young people like me, right, it's convenience going to the grocery store. It's expensive to buy meat anywhere, but it's going to be less expensive than getting special meat from a farm somewhere. Um, and also, you find that grocery stores can pump out faster from meat production companies more and more meat because so many people want meat. How does your farm do it where you allow your animals, it seems, to have the space, the ability to grow, to be able to enjoy life to an extent before they're slaughtered for food? How do you do that in such a way that, you're still being able to create
Hmm.
a lot of meat and being able to give out to restaurants and so forth.
Okay, you're just asking such good penetrating questions. I appreciate it. So in our let's stay. So we're staying apples and apples here. Let's keep talking about broiler chickens. Those are meat chickens as opposed to the chickens that lay eggs. Okay, we're gonna meat chickens. All right. So for us, we got our chicks from a hatchery. All right. So our chicks are coming from a similar hatchery of a Tyson or anybody else. So um, even the industry still hatches chicks. All right, they have to
Right.
come from an egg. Okay, and so we get our chicks from a hatchery. So they're the same basic, genetic and parent stock as in the industry. But when they come in, number one, we don't vaccinate them. There's no vaccinations, and they go into a brooder that has a composting bedding floor. So the signature, one of the signature things that we like people to notice when they come here for a tour is that you can walk into, if we have animals in a structure, that you can walk in there and eat a sandwich in there. There's no obnoxious smells or no obnoxious odors,
Hmm.
partly because it's a little bit smaller, but mainly because we give them way more room, and we use deep bedding. The in the average Tyson chicken house, the carbon nitrogen ratio, I don't want to lose people here, but the carbon nitrogen ratio is all about having a ratio in which decomposition can happen. If carbon
Hmm.
is too high, decomposition is very slow. If nitrogen is too high, decomposition doesn't happen at all because it doesn't have enough carbon to work on. All right.
Hmm.
So that's a nice quick layman's way to explain. So if you want to build a compost pile, you need a carbon nitrogen ratio around 30 to 1, 30 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen. That's kind of the rule of thumb. I mean, it can vary just a little bit, but that's the ideal. Well, in a chicken manure is coming out at 7 to 1. All
Hmm.
right. So you need a lot of carbon to give that manure something to work on to decompose. And the reason this is important is because there are two ways nature sanitizes itself. Nature doesn't build toilets. All right. So how does nature sanitize itself? It does it two ways. One is either with rest and sunshine, which is kind of the pasture movement situation, or vibrant decomposition, which is like a compost pile. All right. Those
Hmm.
are two ways nature sanitizes itself. And so in our brooder house, so the chicks arrive, we put them out of the box, but we put them in a brooder house. A brooder house is simply a structure where we can keep them warm. We have hovers in there that provide heat. So we're trying to make a great big mother hen for 3,000 chicks. Okay,
Yeah.
and it's the wind, we control a little control environment. But the point is that we don't allow. It's divided into sections, so there's only 1,000 birds in each section. It's not 18,000 or 20,000 or whatever in one group. They're in little groups, which greatly reduces the stress because now there are three groups of 1,000 instead of one group of 3,000.
Right.
And that completely changes the social, kind of the social makeup of the flock when there are smaller groups. And then the bedding is very, very deep. I mean, it'll go even 24 inches deep with
Hmm.
with all this carbon in it. So the carbon can assimilate and metabolize and grow bugs, which then the little chicks scratch and eat a lot of bugs out of the bedding, which aerates it and makes it decompose.
Hmm.
And you have nematodes and all sorts of things that then attack any toxins or pathogens that would attack the chicks. And so it's a very different setup from day one. Then
Yeah.
then then at about 2 to 3 weeks, they go out into the pasture, into the field. So these are green fields that we've either mowed or grazed the grass. So the grass is short and the chicks can handle it. And they go in floorless portable shelters 75 or 76 to a shelter. It's 10 feet by 12 feet by 2 feet high. We have over 200 of these,
Hmm.
and we put them in, again, small groups, Danielle, small groups. There's a big difference between 75 in a group and 15,000, okay? And so they're in small groups, and we move these so they're floorless covered shelters. We move them across the pasture. We move them every morning to a new spot, so they move away from yesterday's manure. They're outdoors, plenty of air, plenty of fresh sunshine, plenty of fresh air, and they get a fresh salad bar every day. So they get some crickets and grasshoppers and worms and grass, and of course the grain, the ration that we're feeding them, just like, like Tyson would. Although ours is non-GMO,
Hmm.
and it has no antibiotics, no medications, no chlorine, no antimicrobials. It's just, you know, uh, regular grains, and and we get that. The other thing is, so that's kind of the production system. But here's a critical element: we don't have lights on them, so we actually let them sleep.
Hmm.
So the result is, at night, whereas in these big houses they keep lights on them all the time, so they'll stay awake and keep eating, as you said, all they, eat. Ours, when the sun goes down, they actually go to sleep, and they sleep all night. So ours grow about 20% slower than the
Hmm.
ones in the big factory houses, because they actually get to sleep at night. But again, that takes stress off, and it makes them, um, it makes them healthier. It allows their immune system to function better because they're stress free, and they get to rest at night. So that's just a little bit. Now, when it comes time to process them, okay, so now they're 8, 9 weeks, whatever, and now it's time to process them. So we actually do that right here on the farm, and in the industry they electrocute them. That's how they kill them. Well, we don't. We do the halal kosher, where we just um, slit the jugular with a knife,
Hmm.
and so they don't go into shock. They just they go brain dead in about 1 second, um, and it just feels like a paper cut, and they just faint, they just fade away. Not nearly as shocking, not nearly as traumatic as being electrocuted. And um and, and so that's how we dispatch them, and then of course we process by hand, and that way we can see things, we can monitor things, we can see if everything is okay, and they go in the chill tank, and we're good to go. So that's kind of the way they go through.
How does it affect the taste if you have meat that's been processed? Because I mean, I don't know. I don't, some people, I know I have one friend of mine who does get her meat actually through farms, and she says it's phenomenal. It's so much better than the meat you would get from the grocery store. I've never personally experienced that, so just for you,
Hmm.
um, how does the taste compare if you have, like, for instance, chickens from your farm
Yeah.
compared to a chicken from Tyson that's just processed the typical way?
Right, right. So one of the reasons that we use so many breadings and sauces on chickens in modern cooking is because our meats have become very bland, um, kind of bland and tasteless.
Hmm.
And part of that is because um, the animals aren't getting exercise, and especially because they aren't getting any variety in their diet. So our chickens get some worms, some grasshoppers, some eggs, some clover leaves. They don't eat a lot of grass. They're not a cow. Okay, they are an
Yeah.
omnivore, but that little bit of, consider it like a vitamin supplement, a tonic. All right. So the pasture provides a tonic for them, and it doesn't take very much to make a big difference. And so one of the things that we, whatever, uh, customers tell us, and that your chickens actually have taste. I don't have to put anything on them. I
Hmm.
don't have to. I don't have to put salt. I don't have to put pepper. I don't have to put sauce. I don't have to put any. They actually have taste,
Hmm.
and what you're tasting there is the, you know, is the is the ingested variety of things. I don't know if you're familiar with the Bionutrient Food Association, founded by Dan Kittredge up in Massachusetts, and they are trying to tie production protocols to actual nutrient density in foods using a spectrophotometer. That's what Abby uses on NCIS, you put a speck of, paint in this, she calls it, remember, she calls it mass spec, right? And
Yeah.
you put this speck of paint in there and it tells you all the chemical properties, that are in that speck of paint. And well, the same thing can be done with foods. You can put a tomato in there, you can put a hamburger in there, and you can measure the frequencies, and they will give you the vitamin, mineral,
Mm,
enzyme, relative ratios. And so the Bionutrient Food Association has right now they've measured. They're on their third thing. The first thing they measured was carrots. Then they did broccoli, and now they're doing beef. And what they found with carrots, for example, and broccoli was that when they measured all these samples, in order to get the same nutrition out of the worst carrot that you got out of the best carrot, you would have to eat 40 of the worst carrots to get the same nutrition that was available in one of the best carrots. That's
wow.
how much variety there is. Okay. So now they're doing beef, and this is cutting edge. This is brand new. The chart is even in my email feed. Okay. That's how new it is. They've just done some preliminary data. And one of the things they're finding in beef is that the one thing that they've been able to key the key nutrient density to is how many different kinds of plants did the cow eat.
Hmm.
The more different kinds of plants the cow or the steer, the beef animal, the more variety of plants they ate, the more nutrient density is in the meat, and the nutrient
Mm,
density is what affects our taste. The
hmm.
phytochemicals, which are in the nutrition, that's what our taste buds pick up. So when you pick up the relative taste, I'm sure you've had like watermelon, water one, oh, it just tastes so good, and another one's kind of
Yeah,
bland.
that's true.
Okay. All right. Your taste buds are picking up the relative nutrient whatever densities.
Yeah.
Your taste buds are picking those up. That's why for example, in winemaking, you use a Brix meter, Brix. It measures the sugar content of the grapes, and it'll actually change even in 24 hours. It'll cycle up and down and up and down. And so they're trying to pick those grapes at the perfect Brix measurement. What's that Brix measuring? Sugar. The sugar is a is a signature. It's a signature of the
Hmm.
nutrient density, and of course, your taste buds can pick up that sugar. Maybe not as clearly as a refractometer doing a Brix reading, but nonetheless, your taste buds can pick that up. And so, yeah, this is a fascinating topic. But yeah, it definitely makes a big difference how we raise these things.
It's interesting too, because it seems on your website, there's a big emphasis too on proper stewardship. Um, it also kind of stemming from your faith in God, this idea of being able to steward creation and be able to use the resources that it has to be able to create then food and resources that humans are able to actually grow from in a healthy way. Um, I'm interested, how does your faith really help you along this journey as you seek to be able to produce food and use the natural resources in a stewarding way? Because it's kind of what you were talking about at the beginning. It's more of a stewardship that seems to be the theme of what you're talking about. So how does that connect for you?
Yes. So thanks for the question. So yes, for us, the we believe very strongly that this is ultimately all God's stuff. It's not ours.
Right.
So I mean, he owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, the wealth in every mine. Um, so it's his stuff. So the question we ask ourselves is, so how can we return God a good return on his investment? And I would suggest that if God owns the ocean, let's say the Gulf of Mexico, he might not be very happy that we humans, that we have made a dead zone this of total toxicity and sterility in the Gulf of Mexico, the
Mm.
size of Rhode Island. If I owned the Gulf of Mexico and somebody made it that toxic with chemical and pollution runoff, I don't think I'd be very, if somebody got in your backpack and did that to your backpack, you'd say, "Hey, you didn't take care of my backpack," and so that's the way we view it. So our question then is how do we return more soil, more water, more breathable air, more immunity, more how do we return that as part of our caretaking and stewarding of God's possessions?
Yeah.
And we, you don't have to read very much about history to realize the story of agriculture, if not just civilization, is an exploitation of soil, a diminishment of the ecology, fewer species, more deserts. Um, we're not making more verdant forests; we're making more deserts. Okay, and so we see that degeneration
Mm.
throughout history. Listen, landscape degeneration didn't start with Monsanto. Okay, it started way long time ago, before Christ. Okay, so the degeneration has been happening, and various civilizations have done it, but the Romans did it, the Greeks did it, the in India it was done. I mean, look at Easter Island, look at Greenland, look at you just go around the planet. I mean, Homer, who wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey, walked across the north of Africa, which is today the Sahara Desert, and he said, from one end of Africa to the other, one side to the other, and he said, I never left the shade of a tree. I mean, think about biblically the lions and bears in Israel. Let me tell you, there's no lions and bears in Israel. I've been there. The place, I mean, the Judea and Samaria, where 85% of the Bible happened, is simply a desolate rock pile. I've
Mm.
been there visiting with farmers last spring, and there's no lions and bears. I went to where David lived and where David and Goliath fought, and there it. Trust me, there is no lion and no bear anywhere around.
Mm.
Think about Libya, Libya trip, which is a desert today. It used to be the supplier of monkeys and baboons and all sorts of exotic creatures to Rome, because it was just right. It was close there, right across the Mediterranean, and it was close. So we have done this to the planet, and so my bottom line is that the physical creation is an object lesson of spiritual truth. And so, what I want is for people to come and visit our farm. And when they leave, I want them to say, "Oh, that's what forgiveness looks like. Oh, that's what abundance looks like. Oh, that's what redemption looks like."
Mm.
And so part of that is taking the rocks and the gullies and the desolation and reblooming it and growing soil and filling the gullies with trees and filling the dry brooks with water and seeing the springs run again. That is our mandate to
Mm.
extend spiritual redemption, which is really kind of hard to wrap our heads around. I mean, we get it, spiritual redemption, but man, when you can see physical redemption
Mm.
and you can see it on the landscape, suddenly it gives you a whole different appreciation for, oh wow, that's happening spiritually too. And
Mm.
and that can be done spiritually too. And it gives you great hope and great it gives you a framework to hang your faith on, that this is not just an academic focus group. This actually has legs. It has
Hmm.
legs and arms, and it works. And so that's kind of, I'll get on my soapbox here real easy, but we believe very strongly that our mandate is to be an object lesson of redemptive capacity, um, to our world, and
Hmm.
and to show that, yes, is it fallen? Is it degenerated? Has it been raped? Has it been exploited? Yes, it has. But man, look at this. We've grown 5 inches of soil. There are springs where they used to be dry. The creek is running clean when it used to be dirty. Fields that used to only support 10 cows now support 100 cows. The same field. And
Yeah.
and and that's not from chemical fertilizer. It's not from planting. It's from simply, managing, through nature's abundance. A lot of people don't realize that 500 years ago, North America produced more food than it does today.
Hmm. Yeah.
Now, it wasn't all eaten by people. There were 2 million bison. There were, whatever, 1 to 2 million wolves that all needed 200, I'm sorry, 20 pounds of meat a day. There were 200 million beavers that ate more vegetables than all the humans in North America today. So, but the overall productive abundance of the landscape was actually more 500 years ago than it was today. That should give us all pause. That should give us pause toward from everything from fake meat to AI, to chemical agriculture, to industrial,
Hmm.
centralized factory farming. All these things, it should give us pause, and that's why we've looked to to God's template. A cow is an herbivore. Cows don't eat meat, but scientists told us for years, oh, you grind up dead cows, feed them to cows, that's fine. And then we got bovine spongiform encephalopathy, also known as mad cow. We didn't know that there would be mad cow 30 years later, but we knew enough to know, hey, a cow is an herbivore. Herbivores don't eat meat.
Yeah.
In humility, we look around and say, what's God's pattern? What's God's pattern? And then we stick to that order. And um, that order then actually came out to be kind of important, a few years later when Mad Cow came along.
I have two last questions for you, Joel. One, asking about, this must cost a lot more than it does if you do things in a very, mass production way. Um, how do you guys, I mean, is it difficult to farm this way because of the cost, or is the cost really not that much different? Or what is your take on that?
Yeah. So, oh boy, that's another whole discussion. I'll condense it though really tight for you. Um, uh, First of all, the price at the supermarket that you're seeing right now, that is that is a fraudulent price, because that price does not include many of the externalized costs of cheap food. You know, we we as a culture, we have a cheap food policy. There's nothing else in our culture in which we have an overriding cheap policy. We don't have a cheap clothes policy. We don't have a cheap car policy. We don't have a cheap entertainment policy. We certainly don't have a cheap football player policy. We're in football right now. Everybody's thinking about
Yeah.
football. Okay. All right. So the point is that we don't have a
Hmm.
cheap policy for anything else except food. And and yet I would argue that food is the one that we can least afford to cut corners on, because that's our fuel for our microbiome.
Yeah.
And so here's here's kind of my short answer. My short answer is we believe, and we tell our customers this, we produce the cheapest food on the planet. After I've just denigrated cheapness, we produce the cheapest. Why? Because all of our costs are at the cash register. You know, 50% of all cases of diarrhea in America are caused by foodborne bacteria. What's a case of diarrhea worth? I don't know, but it's probably worth something. My point is, if 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 the cost of all that diarrhea were applied to the food system, instead of being seen as a pharmaceutical problem, we wouldn't be paying what we pay for food. And so, in the last 40 years, the per capita expenditure on food has gone so the average person's income, how much they spend on food, 40 years ago was 18% of per capita income, and healthcare was 9%. Today, it's 9% on food and 18% on healthcare.
Wow.
Is it possible that those two numbers are related? And the fact that in 40 years, we have inverted those two numbers with a cheap food policy and convenience. That being said, when Putin invaded Ukraine and COVID came, and suddenly the grocery store shelves were empty and people were scared we weren't going to have any food, and fertilizer jumped 400% because we get a lot of our fertilizer from Russia. Those kinds of things created great big hiccups in the industrial food system, both in stability, security, and in quality. On our farm, we don't use any Russian fertilizer. On our farm, we don't have long supply chains. And so what we have found over the last 4 years with these big black swan events is that the most stable, secure, and safe food system is one that is independent and disentangled from the industrial chemical system and actually runs on solar energy with management intensity rather than chemical intensity. And that's the big difference. And so I would simply suggest that if we want a secure, stable, and safe food system, we will move toward one that looks more like God's design rather than one that looks less like God's design.
Yeah. Well, one last question for you I wanted to ask you, Joel, is, some people might be overwhelmed by, okay, so they've received all this information from you. It's like, okay, I really want to be able to do something. I want to take a part in this and try and see if I can support or start getting resources from a farm such as yourself that is implementing a more natural way of slaughtering food as well as growing food. But they're overwhelmed because obviously you could get so many different things from so many different farms. You could get all your food to find it all to be clean, which of course is going to be super overwhelming. So where do you think it's a good place for people to start if they kind of want to dip their foot in, okay, I want to try this. I want to see if, maybe even I start feeling better health-wise, if this is something that my family's going to start to enjoy and is going to be on board with me with. What do you think is a good starting point for them?
All right, so you cannot have an authentic food system until you have an authentic kitchen. You cannot abdicate domestic culinary arts. You cannot abdicate, domestic culinary arts and have an authentic food system. What I'm getting at is the place to start is don't buy processed food, Coca-Cola, get rid of, Lunchables, Hot Pockets, the Belvita squeezable cheese. Okay.
Mhm.
All of that super processed stuff with with ingredients that you can't pronounce. Listen, Danielle, you'll love this. I just read this the other day, so I find that if I say it soon, then I'll try to remember it. In 1940, Americans consumed 1 million pounds of monosodium glutamate.
Mm.
Now, monosodium glutamate is a chemically is a bad additive. It's been now linked to all sorts of things from obesity to diabetes and all sorts of things. All right. So in 1940, Americans consumed 1 million pounds of it. Today, we consume 300 million pounds. Now, there
Yeah.
are about 340 million Americans. That means the average American is eating almost 1 pound of monosodium glutamate a year.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where I'm going first is first, cut out the junk. Cut out the junk and find your kitchen again. And the beauty of me saying it, people say, oh yeah, there's a guy saying get in the kitchen. No, no. Listen, this is not grandma's kitchen. We've got hot and cold running water. You don't have to run to the spring and put wood in a stove to get hot water. Okay.
Yeah.
We've got hot and cold running water. We've got refrigerators. We've got we've got time bake. We've got crock pots, ice cream makers, bread makers, Instapots, blenders. I mean, great grandma would have given her eye teeth for the kind of stuff that we have today. So we have all these cool, techno sophisticated gadgets that greatly simplify our our culinary ability. Okay,
Yeah.
and so and so so the thing you have to do is stop getting the junk and then make a mental commitment to begin to participate. You're not going to buy single serving stuff. You're going to eat together as a family again. You're going to actually cook pots of things, and you're actually going to, and they're not going to be just warmed up from a can. Okay, we're going to use Betty Crocker recipes, and we're going to actually, get unprocessed stuff. So that's where you start. And then and I'm a big incremental. Okay, it is overwhelming, but you start there, and then you gradually turn off the TV and abandon your Netflix subscription and take the iPhones away from all your kids, and you start to talk again. And maybe instead of going to Disney World, you take 3 or 4 afternoons in the summer and you go visit a couple farms, and you get the kids out. They see the animals. They pick some tomatoes. Maybe you go pick some peaches and apples, and you start connecting with our ecological umbilical. We live in a time, Danielle, where it seems like the average person thinks that we have become so sophisticated as a culture that we're not dependent on this world anymore, that we can levitate into some sort of Star Trek Nirvana space place, and extricate ourselves from our ecological umbilical. And
Mm.
we don't have to worry about earthworms. We don't have to worry about actinomycetes and mycorrhizia bacteria. And we can just go in. No, 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 no. Listen. We're way closer genetically, socially, spiritually, and physically to Adam and Eve than to Spock, or Star Trek, or the Klingons. Okay, and uh, and so we need to reconnect and rediscover um, what our bodies want as fuel, and what our
Mm.
bodies want as fuel is not uh, our body wants fuel that is pronounceable, that you can make in your kitchen, and that you can find nearby that's unprocessed. And then so you find farmer, you get on some websites, you get stuff from good farms, and you gradually work into this. Yeah, and sometimes it can be a 3 or 4 or 5 year process. But Teresa, just a minute ago, my wife, we get our apples. We don't grow all our own food. We buy apples from a non-chemical apple orchard up the road. We get like 10 bushels a fall, And so she just made applesauce for supper. She took these, we got them in a refrigerator, in a walk-in cooler. You can have them in a root cellar. She took, about whatever, something that would fill a gallon or two of apples, and made a nice great big thing of applesauce, fresh made applesauce for, I mean, if you haven't eaten it, I mean, there is nothing like fresh made anything, and there's no sugar added, there's no nothing, it's just apples.
Hmm.
And we're very far down that path, okay? But if you're
Yeah.
starting, get rid of the toxins, get in your kitchen, get unprocessed, vet your sources, and pretty soon it'll become as normal as breathing. And that's the way you develop a habit.
Well, Joel, thank you so much. And again, for listeners, you're listening to Joel Salatin. He's talking about natural farming as well as the ways that um, processing farming in a stewardship way actually benefits the body as well as the environment in general. You're going to have a link to his website on the blog post as well as the podcast, so feel free to check out his farm. And if you're able to, I know a lot of you listeners are in Virginia, maybe make a trip up there. I'm sure they'd be glad to give you a tour to see what they do. But Joel, I mean, thank you again. I learned a ton, and I super appreciate your time.
Thank you. It's been an honor and a delight to be with you. Thank you for your interest in this, and um, for your clarity in questions, and you got a lot going. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.